I am a writer. I've written two books of historical fiction, World War II spy thrillers. I'm a retired executive with a mid-sized company. I live in Stillwater, Minnesota, and I have a wife and three children and two grandchildren, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about my books today. Well, I really wrote the book first and foremost to honor my mom. It was her 90th birthday, and I've always had this story rolling around in my head, literally for years, of a World War II spy thriller. And I finally put pen to paper. My wife and I, for years, would write down our goals every year, our physical goals, spiritual goals, financial goals, educational goals, family goals. And one year I noticed that I had written as one of my goals to start this novel, and I didn't do it. So that really motivated me to begin the process of writing this book. And like I said, I've had this story rolling around in my head for several years, and really got excited and committed to actually finish the book in time for my mom's 90th birthday. Well, I like doing historical fiction, so I wanted a story that was based in part on historical truth, something that actually happened. And in this case, the particular technology that the Nazis were trying to perfect, in all likelihood, would have won them the war if they had been able to mass produce this technology a few years earlier. And so I wanted a character with an aeronautical background who could understand a little bit about planes and how they worked, so that he could actually be dropped in to Germany undercover and articulate in layman's terms what exactly the Nazis were working on. Yeah, I did a lot of research into the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. And the OSS was an organization that was started by William Donovan, nicknamed Wild Bill Donovan, who is worth a book in itself. A fascinating man, the most decorated soldier slash citizen in the history of our country. He was a World War I hero. He was awarded the Medal of Honor in World War I, and he had a number of different service medals that he was honored with as well. He was honored by countries outside of the United States. For example, France, he was given their highest award. So, and Donovan was an old classmate of Franklin Roosevelt in law school. And they were actually political opposites. Donovan was a conservative, but he was first and foremost a patriot who loved his country. And Roosevelt needed somebody that he could trust and who had credibility with a number of different players in the military arena. And he chose Donovan to start this project. And it became obviously a world famous organization in time. But Donovan was the right man at the right time to start the OSS. Yeah, the technology that the Nazis were trying to perfect would have given them complete, not only air superiority, but air dominance in the battle above the skies of Europe. And it would have completely changed the game in their favor and would have rendered the Allies' Air Force, frankly, obsolete or not even competitive against what they could do. Yeah, George Parker is Frank Sweeney's godfather. and they had a close relationship. George Parker was the partner of Frank's father, Michael Sweeney. They were detectives together in the St. Paul Police Department. And Parker ended up leaving the police department and went to work for the FBI. So he moved as luck was back then for an FBI agent. They would live in many different cities over the course of a few years. They might spend 1 or 2 years in one city and be transferred to the next city. Well, Parker worked his way up to the FBI, but he was not a politician. He did not enjoy politics. And the FBI was a pretty political organization under J. Edgar Hoover. So we wanted to make a change, talk to Donovan, who loved him. And George Parker worked his way up to really being Donovan's right-hand man. And so when the assignment came for Germany and the description came of what kind of person they needed to go into Germany behind the lines, with one of the attributes being an aeronautical background, Parker immediately thought of his nephew, Frank. And that was a real moral battle for him because ultimately he had to do what was right and best for the country, even if it meant potentially sacrificing his nephew and his godson. So that's kind of the backdrop of George Parker and how he recruited Frank Sweeney into the OSS. Well, the fact is that the OSS was a really new organization. It was less than a year old, and yet the English were far ahead of the Americans in terms of their spy technology, their network of spies that they had already strategically located all over Europe. So the Brits were well ahead of their American cousins, but Donovan was trying to build this organization. They knew of some sort of technology that the Nazis were trying to perfect, and they just really needed someone who understood airplanes to really basically go undercover into Germany to identify what this technology was, communicate it through code back to America, and then really decide on a plan of how they're going to render this technology useless. So it was quite a job for an inexperienced American pilot who could easily pass as an Irish journalist. It was quite a chore for him to accomplish this goal. Well, a number of the characters in the book are historical figures. For example, Wild Bill Donovan, as I mentioned earlier, was a true American hero. And I believe Eisenhower, when Donovan finally passed away, called him the last American hero. So Donovan was real. FDR, of course, was real. He's in the book a bit. The Germans, many of them are actual historical characters. Hermann Goering is mentioned in the book a fair amount. Von Grime, who is sort of the central character on the German side, was also a real person. So we have a number of different characters who, actually lived through all this during the war and were central to the book and the story. It's a little bit of both. Certainly, there's intrigue. There's an element of kind of a whodunit in terms of identifying an additional spy in the book. There is real character development. You really get a feel for who these people are and what they went through, and the decision making that they had to employ, really thinking on their feet, and in Frank Sweeney's case, having kind of a general plan. He had a mission, but he didn't have a fully blown out plan as to how he's going to accomplish the mission. So he had to kind of feel his way along until he had a better understanding of the local environment, who the players were in Germany, and how they might be able to serve him, frankly, in his plan to get rid of this technology, but also get out of the country. My goal would be to make this a series. I feel a real responsibility in my own small little part here to tell stories of American heroes who really impacted and influenced and helped win this war. So I'm concerned that the generations that have come since the greatest generation are not aware of some of these stories, and certainly not telling these stories and passing these stories on to the generations behind us, uh, because this is part of our history and our heritage. And it cannot be lost on us that 80 years ago, there was a madman who is literally trying to control the world. That's true. That's not some superhero make believe comic book. That is reality. And he did horrifically awful things to humanity. And we cannot forget that. And the way to not forget it is to make sure people hear the story and understand what was at stake for not only America, but for the free world. I think one of the themes was unity, and that is also present in my second book as well. But there was a feeling of unity throughout the entire country. America was united, and in a simple goal of not only defeating Nazism and Japan, but to unify our nation. And everybody played a part. There were rationing that was going on, that most Americans don't even know about. They rationed nylons. They rationed food a lot. They rationed gasoline. That wouldn't play well in today's country. Can you imagine trying to unite the country in a time of war, and everybody had to do their part? Everybody had to sacrifice. So it was a very uncommon time when the media came together, Hollywood came together, certainly the government and the American people all came together with this common goal of being united to defeat these enemies. I think I would, a couple of things. One, like I said, I'd like to recognize the greatest generation, what's called the greatest generation, and the sacrifice that these people made. This is only one generation or two generations removed from Americans today. People's fathers served in World War II. People's grandfathers served in World War II, and grandmothers. And so I want to certainly honor them, and we do that through um, the nonprofits that we donate the money for the books to. But so I think honoring them, but also encouraging America that it doesn't have to be the way it is today. That we are so divided today. It's literally 50-50 when you look at the polling of conservatives versus liberals and so forth. But there was a better time when the country was united, and I think I'd like to inspire people, at least try to inspire people to have hope that we could get back there again, where we have um, a common moral code, a common decency code, a common belief that things can get better, and it's up to us as individuals to make it better. Well, I think the growing relationship between Frank Sweeney, the protagonist, and Lee Conway, who is the daughter of the aeronautical engineer who was basically made to go to Germany to work on this project. I really like how that relationship and those characters developed, and their friendship and frankly their love for one another developed throughout the book. You could even call it a kind of a partial love story, if you will. So I liked how those characters kind of came together. It was a slow romance, and so that was kind of fun to write, but also to as I was writing it, thinking, boy, I think this is good. I think this will resonate. There were other scenes that resonated with me as well. I tried to. There's some humorous parts in the book as well, because that's how life was back then. It was very serious time, certainly for the nation, but I tried to also include some everyday things that people could relate to with the characters. So I hope I accomplished that. Well, putting my modesty in my back pocket. I think the reviews that have come in have been very, very positive. A lot of people really love the book, and I think I was able to write a book that didn't have all of the uh, unnecessary language in it or graphic scenes in it. I firmly believe that you can write a very entertaining story without having to stoop to the common things that are so prevalent in books today. I was talking to a young author, college age, and I read his book, and he asked me to critique it, and I said, why do you have this language in there? And he said, well, and it was a 1930s era book, and he said, well, that's just how people talked. And I said, no, no, they really didn't talk like that back then. And I said, ask your grandmother; she'll tell you that people didn't talk that way. So I think what I would like to communicate is that you can write a really good book or make a really good movie without all that extra stuff in there that people feel obligated to put in there. And so I'd like to hold these books up as an example of a great story with really great characters, but without all of the unnecessary things in it. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you.